Cedemos el uso de la palabra a nuestro secretario general de la Internacional de la Educación, David Edwards.
Hola. Muy buenas tardes. Iba a decir buenos días. Voy a hablar en castellano al principio. Son los que necesitan audífonos que lo pongan, y los que no me entienden por mi gringo argentino. Bueno, es mi culpa, pero no puedo hacer nada en contra. Bueno, lo que estamos muy felices, sobre todo quiero agradecer otra vez a Alfonso y Cente por esa gran ocasión. Nosotros tuvimos pensado hacerlo hace un par de años, pero por la pandemia no fue posible. Pero estar aquí ahora con ustedes me da mucha energía. Y también teniendo el presidente del país abriendo y charlando con nosotros de su historia y sus perspectivas sobre la importancia de la educación pública, me emocioné. Porque hay pocos gobiernos mundialmente en el mundo que realmente tomen su responsabilidad de financiar educación pública tan serio que en México y en pocos otros países. Y es por eso vamos a hacer nuestra campaña. Y voy a presentar brevemente la campaña y después vamos a tener una conversación con dos compañeros que están aquí sobre qué significa la campaña en su país y para educación superior. Entonces yo quiero que nosotros pensamos en esto como una sesión de estrategia. Una sesión de estrategia sobre cómo podemos traducir las metas, los objetivos de nuestra campaña a las realidades de ustedes en todos los países.
Of all of you in all of your countries. So, I'm going to make a short presentation. Do I have the clicker? Let's see if it works.
I'm going to go back and forth with English and Spanish, so that'll just keep it nice and interesting. So, Public Fund Education, la campaña, empezó básicamente, como dijo Susan, creció de lo que hemos aprendido.
Grew from what we have learned through the last campaigns we have launched. So the campaign, Let's Join for Public Education, also against commercialization and privatization, and Learn for the Planet. We learn very important lessons, that the campaign is not only the pencil and the motto. The campaign are the actions that you leave, that you use in your negotiations for the public, for the government, in your countries. And the campaign is successful when you are successful. So it has this identity that we like a lot, because when the team were thinking of how do we do the campaign, they started thinking of French and Spanish and trade school, Go por la Pública. We create school, Go public, but for la Pública, we learned that in English is go public. It means to say something publicly so that everybody knows that it's not a secret, but at the same time, it means let's go with the public. So, the public schools, public education. So it has this double sense that we enjoy so much. So this teaches you a little bit of how it is in terms of higher education. Is that my presentation, he's asking? I'm not the brightest, okay? But I know when my presentation is my presentation. And I don't think this is one, but it's okay. I have it here. Let's improvise. At a certain moment, but are you going to put it there? I have it here. It's okay. I have it here. It's for them to see it, not for me. Okay, so I have it in English. Go Public Fund Education is an urgent call to government for finally and completely finance the public education and invest in education workers. So the thing is that it's like very driven. The strength of the campaign comes from us, the voices of workers. And a question people ask is, why now? We've always had problems with financing, so what's new now? The thing is that globally, we have a crisis in terms of schools, universities, lack of 44 million teachers in the world. So the problem is that they're not well distributed. The poorer countries experience this more. And I don't know you, but in many parts of the world, many of the solutions they have thrown in front of us is like in terms of costs, keeping low costs, the new technology, and so the rich have a professor in a small classroom with 6 students, and the poorer have a classroom with 100 kids. They have no support, but there's something behind that, and that's what we call the children of others, not ours. And so our campaign is that every kid, every student have a right to quality public education. We've also talked about privatization of the education to lucrate, and we've talked about that before, and equity and access problem also. And worldly, less people want to be globally, less people want to be teachers. Okay, I think I got my slides. Less people want to be professors. And after the pandemic, we understand why. The position is very high, pay very low, stress very high, the prestige is very low. And before the pandemic, it's a good thing about using laptops and tips. The only thing after the pandemic they get used to for kids to learn is that the students and the teachers have all to go to the school, be there, and this pressure and the status of the teachers, and also with higher education and research, is something that is going on all over the world. And in terms of accountability internationally, we don't have the adequate instruments to question the governments so that they comply with what they should comply. And there's also the sustainable financing when there's a war. There's also, they need money. And when there's an economical crisis, there's always money for them. And big companies, oh, don't worry, come here and you don't have to pay taxes. There's always money. But when it comes to education, that has the adequate funding, it's too high. So you, as members of the IA, you politically have to build this, i.e., the building blocks, the foundation of our campaign politically with its values, solutions presented at congresses, and the education committee make the decision that actually, given the world situation of lack of teachers, the lack of political will to promote public education, we have to do something that gathers everything that we are doing at global level as education, as government, and do this global effort. So I already mentioned the 3 previous campaigns, Global Response. Do you remember that company, Pearson? And during that campaign, we shed the light on privatizing companies. I was very happy to hear the president talk about the textbooks, because who loses when the teachers publish and write their own texts? So Pearson is the one that loses, so that makes me very happy. And 3 objectives, I'm gonna go a little bit faster. This is the narrative for public education. Not only are we against of what, we are in favor of what then? So why is the public education, what does it mean for students, society, democracy? But also to talk about the negative aspects of austerity and the privatization. We have evidence, we have the experience, and we systematically can talk about this and put it on the table for discussions with governments that failed, that doesn't work. So we have to look for another alternative. And obviously to support you, the organizations of the IE in your international and national campaigns, building links between unions and government. So one thing that made me very happy is the possibility to be with all the members all over the world in the launching of the campaign. And we have actually been all over the world almost. Latin America, this is the network of women with their launching, and we're talking about a gender vision. And we can go to the web page of the campaign. You can see where we did the launchings, studies, and events and activities. We can see a lot. In Latin America, the regional conference, they did a launching, and at the end they did a workshop excluding and writing their action plans that can be implemented in their countries, and they did this public commitment. This is very interesting. Also, we have the African region. We also did a lot in this continent, in the Pacific Islands, the Arab countries. The president of Iraq and the prime minister received us in the government house to do a launching with the government and make a commitment. The lack of teachers is 240,000 in Iraq. And so we worked with a plan on how to hire and support and unionize these teachers. Also, you can also go to the web page, but in Australia, Brussels, Ghana, talking about taxes. This is very important to talk about taxes in Nepal, in Portugal, and also for the people that support us, the people who support teachers. And in India, I love that one, a month there. A yatra is a march made by Gandhi, and the teachers in India said, we're going to march for a month from all over India, talking with communities, with the public, with why are we for the public? We need for the next generation of teachers to have a retirement with a dignified pension, and these sort of things. And to March, Susan was in Delhi, and it was a very big and very important moment in Teachers' Day. And of course, in the media, all over the press, we are looking at a lot of countries, and we can see the messages, the arguments in different languages. And something that, well, I'm sure that you've heard about this. A year ago, around,
muchos de nosotros estuvimos en
we
el ONU.
were in
Y fue la conferencia
this
de transformación
conference.
de educación.
It was the transformation of education. They invited all the chiefs of states of the world for the UN in order to commit to education. We only were missing one thing, and
Al llegar a la
it was that when we
se
arrived
cayó
to the
el tema de
conference,
docentes.
that the subject of teachers, they didn't have it, and their plan said that teachers and the bus that they couldn't speak about that. And I said to the General Secretary of the UN, how are you going to talk about this? You're lacking educators, and they don't have enough money. How are you going to change all the program if you don't talk about teachers? And he said, you know, you're right. We're going to form a commission, a high-level panel with you, with UNESCO and the OIT, to get recommendations to the governments in the world. And November 8, you're going to see those recommendations. And I just talked to the joint secretary, and he said, you should be very happy as unions because you talk about collective bargaining, the right to form a society, to form unions, all the workload that you have, and all the things that we're going to do now within the campaign is to translate those recommendations in a toolbox that you can use in your negotiations with governments. That's what we're going to get. And also to talk about forming national commissions regarding the lack of teachers in every country and each country in the world, and you have a right to be members of those commissions. And we're also negotiating with the possibility of being part of the UN at a global level, and of course we're talking about higher education. So I talked about the panel. Now we are in the second phase. This second phase is, I said, beyond the launching and good pictures and all, is the work. And all the unions members of the IE take very seriously what the campaign means and commit with a political will. And we're going to be supporting them and holding their hands and doing solidarity and research. We've already started that in Mongolia 2 weeks ago. They started their plan with the financing for education in Mongolia. So the question, where are we going? Or where do we go from here?
3 principios.
3 principles. Countering austerity and privatization. Increase public funding for public further and higher education, and ensuring quality terms of employment and working conditions, that they are good quality. In order to think about a little bit about this, we have 2 guests to have a conversation regarding the situation in their country. What are they facing? I'm going to change to English so that we can start a conversation on what type of strategies we can use and reinforce and help ourselves and win this campaign. This is very important. Therefore, so we'll see you in Buenos Aires in the World Congress. I'm going to my colleagues with my microphone.
Hello, and now we're back to English. Okay, good. So in the previous plenary, we heard about the sort of current financing landscape that we were just talking about and I was presenting. But it's really important to understand what these trends mean in concrete terms in the lives of our members, in the lives of leaders. Because we know that many further and higher education unions are already building campaigns. They're already working on capacity building projects and solidarity in this area. And we're really hoping that what this panel can do is offer valuable insights into the strategies and actions taken to respond to the challenges facing the sector. So first we have, we have both Agustin Cano Menoni from ADUR Uruguay, which is one of our newest member organizations. So Agustin, please give him a big EI welcome. Yeah. And you can also do that for Annette, even though it's not her first conference, Annette Dolan from TUI Ireland. Yeah, please. So Agustin, based on what we've just been talking about, yeah, maybe we can ask a little bit about the challenge and trends that you're facing and your colleagues are fighting against in Uruguay right now. Yeah, thank you.
Bueno, ¿se escucha así? Buenas tardes, gracias David.
Good afternoon.
Como hoy decía, es la primera vez que nuestra Asociación de Docentes de la Universidad de la República de Uruguay participa de la conferencia, así que traigo el saludo de nuestro sindicato de ADUR para la conferencia, para todos ustedes y para la campaña por la pública. Para ubicar dónde nos encontramos en este momento en Uruguay, es necesario hacer una mínima contextualización del sistema de educación superior de nuestro país, que tiene sus peculiaridades. Se trata de un país de 3 millones de habitantes, donde la matrícula postsecundaria es mayoritariamente pública, alrededor del 87% de la matrícula es pública, y donde en materia de educación universitaria hay una institución, la Universidad de la República,
there is an institution where our union belongs that has 85% of the total register. 80% of scientific research is they do the activities of the university. And this is the university reference, historical, and it's got also big growth. In this framework, by understanding what happens in this institution, we understand mainly what happens all together in the group. And since 2020 to today, we have been facing a defunding policy in public education that has implied as freezing this money a fall in over the period of 6% of the global budget of the institution, a fall that is going to be of 2.2%, and we're not going to recover what we lost already. In a historical period where the university register went off, just the income grew for 21%. And in a period where, in addition, I'm sure in your universities happened also the attention to the pandemic, the crisis implied in our university not to attend our demands and to also attend new problems. While we were keeping the virtual education, we had to attend to all of this, and more than 85% were virtual in the most difficult moments of the pandemic. Our university were working in laboratories that transformed with attention to sanitary needs. We were working on anything or everything. So in this period, we lost wages while working more and in a different way, and while our conditions of work were going down, and how our salary was going down, and what fruit of what kind of mobilizations we had. We achieved that in 2025 we will start the year with a wage loss of 2 points. And this X-ray of the current situation in my country, we have to give some numbers that are comparable. The university represents 85% of the registration. Its budget is 0.74% of the GDP in the country. It has a free access policy. It's free.
En términos
And in the terms of the educational budget in general, including from grade to university, Uruguay went from a budget of 4.5% of the GDP in 2019 to 3.83%. To see, just to look at the amount of the fall. And at a level of science and technology, we are also in a very low algorithm, in the lowest in the country, is 0.4% of the GDP in science and technology is stuck there. And so this is a situation more or less.
Thank you. I never think of Uruguay in terms of a country that doesn't invest in education. For some reason in my mind, I always think of Uruguay, I think about Pepe, and I think about, the past, the history that you've had and what you've come through. And so it's really kind of shocking for me to hear about how little has been invested. Also with the high level of 85% of students in the university that you're covering. And generally it's a country that's, at least out on the global stage, is talking about human capital investments and all these kinds of things. So I'm a bit shocked. Estoy un poco choqueado, but okay. So what I'm interested in understanding, and I think our colleagues are interested in understanding, is in the face of that, as a union, as a higher education union that's facing that, what's the strategy that you guys are employing, that you're using? And maybe also, if I can be so, how might this campaign that we're talking about link on and be able to sort of connect up with what you're trying to do and maybe help support you and you also support the campaign? Yeah?
Sí.
Yes, well, I'm going to put two numbers that I'm going to use to put into context how we have approached our actions and strategy and how we have articulated these strategies with this campaign, which has been very important for us. In 1985, with the dictatorship, military dictatorship left, the higher in the teacher in higher level represented 12%. In 2021, the integrated were only 5%. In 81, we don't have figures. The teachers 1 and 2, which are the lowest, who have the lower wages and very bad conditions, were 22%. And in 2021, they were 65%. And within those teachers, grade 1 and grade 2, the lower, most of them, the 65% of that 65% are women, which is proof that they have overload conditions of work. They're very biased regarding their academical preparation against them, and in that period they went from 37,000 from 81 to 87,000 for a gross rate of 7.6, 102.6%. So these different numbers of the policy of free education that the university has had has allowed coming rate of the entering of the media. We have a lot of leaving of the school, and this has been compared with industrialized countries. It has something that is very precarious, and it's very obvious. That is why we have put in the center of our campaign both 2022 and 2023 the subject of improving the work and conditions of the the work of the teachers, salary, the dimension of gender in the possibility of that career, and to have a healthy, free of violence environments for work, and a lot of things that we have worked with. We have tried to put this problem and this objective of improving is part of the defense and development of public university education, their quality, their possibility of development all over the country, and the possibility of keeping stable teachers teams, and people won't go out of the country, because I don't like that expression, the leak of brains. And so this country these people, they did all their education abroad. They want to come back, but they can develop in some careers, and they have a social pertinence proven, but they cannot do this because of lack of resources and how long, etc., where the problem of improving these teachers' work conditions, it is related to the education, public education program, and they do have quality education and all over the country. This is where we put the campaign. It looks normal, but it's not, because many times we move all over with the budget. So we have the college kids complaining, and so we started this campaign that where the university hospital, which is very important for the attention of popular education, the poor sectors, there are attention difficulties. It's normal, but it's not. It looks normal, but it's not. The teacher that has already been educated abroad cannot come back. It looks normal, but it's not. The total education that we have for scientific education that Uruguay has,
parece normal, pero no lo es.
It seems normal, but it's not.
Esa campaña nosotros la articulamos con Por la Pública, procurando también incluir la dimensión internacional, sin la cual no entenderíamos los procesos ni podríamos contextualizar. El problema, por ejemplo, de la cantidad de docentes que miran a Argentina, a Chile, a Brasil, a países cercanos, donde reciben condiciones laborales y salariales mucho mejor. Y donde además podríamos ubicar también no solo el nivel de comprensión de la problemática, sino el nivel de la acción. Ver cómo en otros países se están generando alternativas, se están generando ejemplos que podemos recrear en nuestro país. Entonces, la campaña Por la Pública,
this campaign, Go Public, it seems normal, but it's not. It was jointly developed, and we developed all those mobilizations. There was a university strike. We didn't have a strike since 2002, and the last one was in 2022. Also, the 5 schools at the university were evacuated, and the Union of Education, and 2 of them belong to education, and also we, through this Go Public campaign, there were 60,000 people. It was a very big mobilization in Uruguay, and also visits to the Chamber of Senators, to the congressmen also, and those actions were really valued by the society. We have 85% of support, open letters signed by prestigious scientists and other people, and this slowed down the cutoffs. For example, we stopped that, and there were increases, but there were not enough to be up to par with the inflation.
Gracias.
Thank you. Very interesting. I like what you said. It seems normal, but it's not.
I think that's really interesting. It's starting to feel normal, but it shouldn't. It's not normal. This is not normal. That's a great one. So Annette, thinking about the trends, thinking about the challenges, thinking about the campaign, thinking about the Irish context, what kind of reflections and thoughts and sort of challenges and strategies are you employing right now with TUI?
I'm just going to start by saying a gwina ushla, a coglacacha, agus a carja. Ve am anbuihak, ve an shot live, an shot in you in Mexico. So, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, I'm really grateful and honored to be here among you today in Mexico. And that was just a little bit of the Irish language. And I've spoken to the translators, so they knew I was going to translate. So the challenges facing us in Ireland, I'll start by saying that, you know, and I looked at Julian's charts there, and you would expect that Ireland maybe would be, you know, way up in the top, but it's not. We're a country of 5.5 million, and we spend only 0.9%, so less than 1% of GDP on tertiary education compared to 1.4% in the OECD. That was the figures in 2021. So the ratio of students to teachers in higher education in Ireland is very significantly above the OECD average. So it is 23-1 as opposed to 17-1, which was the OECD average figures in 2021. So what does that mean? That means that you have larger class sizes, less access to laboratories and equipment, less access to libraries and facilities and tutorials. But we also have to take into account what that means for the social dimension of higher education. And I was really struck by the president of your country earlier, who was passionate, but not alone passionate about the social dimension of higher education, but that in his presidency so far has taken very, very practical steps to improve that social dimension. And I think all of us as educationalists, we want all of the students, you know, in our communities, irrespective of the money that they have, irrespective of the roads that they grew up in, irrespective of whether or not their parents had the opportunity to go to even post-primary education or third level education, that they can take that pathway and transform their lives. But what higher student ratios mean is that they don't have that additional support that the teachers in higher education should be giving to them. And what that means then is that there is higher dropout rates. Because if you're coming from a socio-economically deprived backgrounds, you're going into a strange environment, an environment that's alien to you and your family. So you need that extra support and guidance to show you the way so that you can succeed. Ireland has a very young population. We have a very high birth rate. We've a growth in population that's likely to remain high for the foreseeable future. And at the moment there is, you know, a bulge going through post-primary level. So that bulge is now beginning to go through higher education, and that's going to be there for at least the next 10 years. Another fact that you may be surprised to hear, because the figures were too small on the chart to be able to see it, but Julian's excellent chart, but two-thirds of the student population in Ireland go to further and higher education. However, and this was also set out in Julian's chart, the spending per student is 35% less than it was 10 years ago before you adjust for inflation. So while the funding went up, so if you look at the amount of money that the government are giving to higher education, while that money went up, because the numbers in the colleges increased, the amount per student actually decreased. So it's wonderful that we have more than 1.5 times the international average of participants in higher education in Ireland. We spend only 2/3 of that international average on the system. So it's great to do more with less, but that is putting huge pressure on our members. And in Ireland, you know, my colleagues here, Frank Jones and Emma Sokil are here. They from the Irish Federation of University Teachers. They represent members in the established universities. Myself and my colleague Colin Kelly are here, and we're representing members. Obviously, we're representing members in post-primary, further and adult education, but also in higher education. But our members in higher education are in the technological university sector. And in that sector, our members teach between 16 and 18 hours per week. So that is putting enormous pressure on them, you know, to engage in research and have community engagement. So that is as a result of not having enough funding in higher education because of the increase in numbers. And a key difficulty, and I'm going to finish with this, is the employment control framework. So the management in the various universities, and that's irrespective of whether it's in the established university sector that Emma and Frank represent, or whether it's in the sector that we represent, the employment control framework was introduced when the Troika was in Ireland. You know, you all know who the Troika are, because we were back in the crisis in 2008. We weren't in great shape. So we still have to look for permission. So managements have to look for permission from the ministry to employ additional staff. So that's something that needs to be urgently removed and replaced by the introduction of a student teacher or student lecturer ratio in higher education. It's there in post-primary education and in primary education in Ireland. So right throughout the crisis, their numbers did not decrease to the same extent that the numbers of teachers decreased in higher education. So that's something that we would like introduced. That's something both IFET and ourselves would like introduced, is a student-teacher ratio in higher education, which would mean that staff would have a greater chance of having that balance between teaching, research, and community engagement. So I'll maybe finish with that, and then, you know, talk about your next question, which I assume is going to be the same as Julian's. What are we doing together as unions?
Talk about that, yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, and I think it's important to say that the unions in higher education work together in Ireland, right? So ourselves and IFET and our colleagues, you know, Frank and Emma, we work together on campaigns. There are other unions in Ireland who also represent members in higher education. So through the umbrella organisation of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, we would meet on a regular basis and discuss what we're going to do. There are 4 teacher unions in Ireland, and we meet about, I'd say once every 2 months. So we meet maybe 6 times a year, because maybe 15, 20 years ago, we would come out in public and maybe say things that would undermine another union. So now we meet on a regular basis, and we have our arguments, our differences behind closed doors. So at least that when we come out and we talk to the government and we talk to the media and we have our campaigns, at least then we have a structured campaign. that's going forward in a way that's going to benefit all of us. And I think that's important to say that. And I'll maybe you'll be surprised by this next point. And Frank and Emma and Colin and myself discussed, what would I say when we talked about the unions kind of working together. So the first one we chose was, well, what do you do when you've no budget? It's very easy to come up with a big, long list of what to do when there's lots of money. So what do you do when you've no budget? And we faced that situation in Ireland, as did all of you, after the crash in 2008. So we had cuts across salaries early on in the crash. And then in 2013, there was a further national pay agreement. We negotiate pay agreements across the whole of the public sector in Ireland. So in 2013, the national pay agreement that we negotiated, the Haddington Road Agreement, and the only reason it's called the Haddington Road Agreement is because that's the road in which it was negotiated. It's very near the rugby stadium for any of you who watched the rugby last week. It's just actually down the road from there. So that pay agreement in 2013, that pay negotiations in 2013, the government started out by saying we have to reduce the public pay bill by 1 billion. Now that's a huge amount of money for a country of 5.5 million, 1 billion. It's a huge amount for the public service. So what they wanted was additional productivity. They wanted us to increase our working hours, and they wanted incremental freezes, and plus lots of other things, but I won't go into them. But we did all of those. We took on additional hours, we took on additional productivity, and we agreed to increment freezes. But we knew that if we put that agreement to a ballot of our members, there was going to be a huge difficulty, particularly the members that we represent. We knew there was going to be conflict, industrial action, and this was at a time, when we knew the government didn't have the money to pay us. So what we did was we kind of, racked all of our brains. We had a brainstorming, and we could only do this if all of the unions in higher education working together would agree to this. So in return for all of those terrible measures, we said we have a lot of casual members working in higher education. So could we get the government to agree to give those casual members on fixed-term contracts who didn't have security of tenure, could we get them to agree to permanent contracts after 2 years? And could we get them to agree to augment or increase the hours for people who had contracts on less than 2 hours and maybe or on less than full hours, and maybe had contracts, maybe permanent contracts on less than full hours? And could we convert casual employees, could we convert them into the full-time grade? And they agreed to do so.
Okay, because the suspense was killing me.
Okay, so that was the first issue. So that was good, right? But as unions, we can't be complacent. So that agreement is there, we've signed up to that. But as trade unions, we have to remain vigilant and continue to challenge the introduction of any new grades, and also to continue to challenge the casualisation of staff, because it's a problem that doesn't go away. Okay, the next challenge, and this is a challenge particularly for the sector that we represent, the technological university sector. So we had 14 institutes of technology. They were originally established in the 1970s as regional technical colleges. So in other words, they were dispersed all around the island of Ireland, and delivering research-informed teaching across all the levels of higher education, linking those programs to the needs of their regions and citizens and businesses. So over the course of a number of years, we negotiated the merger of 12 of those institutes of technology into technological universities, and that happened between 2019 and 2022. But we had been calling for a review of that sector for years, and the government agreed to bring in the OECD to do that review. So that review, called a Review of Technological University Academic Career Paths, Contracts and Organisation in Ireland, that was published in December 2022, 10 months ago. We haven't commenced those negotiations yet, but hopefully they will happen soon. So what we want is we want something very different than what the management want. And this is where the campaign, and particularly the inspiration for your Go Public campaign, comes from. What the management would like is to negotiate conditions of service, contracts, salaries for each of those 5 technological universities. What we want the creation of a sector, a technological university sector, where we can negotiate conditions of service for our members. That is what we want, because we fought as a union really hard, and my colleagues in the past fought really hard to have national, agreed, negotiated conditions of service for the members in the Institutes of Technology. We want the same for the 5 technological universities, and we're going to have a very, very, very difficult fight, and that's why I am inspired by your campaign, and certainly we will be taking lots of leaves out of your books. I'm also involved with ETUS